réduire la pollution et réduire les transports collectifs. Et c'est extrêmement important. C'est en ce moment qu'il faut prendre des décisions pour que dans l'avenir, on ait un avenir plus viable. Merci.
Mais je peux dire des choses, mais c'est souvent pas intéressant.
Ok, je vais juste checker le temps. So it's 8:40, il est 8h40. C'est pas forcément nécessaire qu'on termine dans 5 minutes. I would like to see if does anybody want to try and do a wrap of what we did tonight.
My name is Nicolas Desdames, if it's not obvious by the hat. Mon nom est Nicolas, mes pronoms sont Yel. Je suis de Justice Climatique Montréal. I'm from Climate Justice Montreal. A bit of housekeeping once again. If you're hungry, there is some sort of bean chili with crackers over there. We have water at the water fountain back there. The bathrooms are located right before the door to your left. Yes, the first stall when you go in is accessible for people in wheelchairs and people with disabilities. Or else you can take the elevator and go downstairs and there's one there too, but this one is closer. Otherwise, I want to thank all the other groups who were part of making this happen. Aequo, Defund la Police, Prenons la Ville, ISWP. Aussi, merci à tous les collaborateurs qui ont fait le terrain avant nous, comme Asset du Nord, et tous les autres groupes qui travaillent sur le transit en commun, qui doit être gratuit, accessible et étendu. So, who is Climate Justice Montreal? We're a real group fighting for climate justice through education, mobilizing, and organizing, existing since 2009. I haven't been there since then myself, only 2017. We've had a rotation of members, kind of a springboard for stuff like Centre québécois du droit environnemental, 350 Canada, the Hub for Climate Justice Organizing. Hi, Sarah. The Breach sees Concordia, which is a solidarity economy incubator. So we do education, organizing, and mobilizing, as I said, through an anti-oppressive and decolonization lens. We also try to have care at the center of our work and take directions from those most affected, from the front lines, Indigenous people, migrants, and all the ones who are at the front lines of all these struggles. We've been part of defeating projects such as Energy East, GNL. We've helped the Kanien'kehá:ka try to resist settler colonial land theft that's still ongoing in Kanesatake and Ganawage. We've helped show the documentary that's crucial to any settler's education to earn 70 years of resistance, the siege of Kanesatake. We also have a workshop on resisting false solutions. If you came into the building, hopefully you got a copy. We also give workshops on that. And as you know here, we are launching a coalition, hopefully, on fair, free, accessible, and extended public transit. It's built out of the framework that came out of No Climate Justice Without Social Justice. Big thanks to Tasmin Yakik, a young Muslim activist who came up from resisting against Bill 21, which is unfortunately law right now. And through her work, I got to learn about the Palestinian cause, which is unfortunately at the center of a lot of things right now. So if you're not aware of these things, I urge you to get educated, but also about Sudan. There's flyers at the front for an event on the 21st of April, put by the wonderful Duha, and also Congo and all these things that are linked to what is going on right now in Quebec with hydroelectricity, the battery, and all these things. But yeah, we're using this framework of building a coalition across difference, not in efforts to just convince elected officials to make change. We want to sort of have all the stakeholders at the table and not just have demands from one small group, but build a functioning coalition that works across difference. And I'm basically rambling now, sorry. So we're advocating for system change, giving control to the communities, and it's a great way to work out if you want to come and join us too. So yeah, And now I'll give it over to Jason Prince.
So hello, good evening. It is my duty, my job tonight, to do two things. I'm going to try and set up tonight's exchange on free public transit, and I'm also going to be your guide, our guide together over the next hour and a half that we have together to successfully weave together all these different viewpoints around this question. So I would propose, and I haven't actually checked this with our speakers, but I would propose that we give each other about 10 minutes each, à peu près 10 minutes chaque, to present our position, or our point of view. And then what we would do in a second part would be to talk amongst us, the five of us, have a little bit of a fishbowl exercise. So, get a chance to cross-pollinate a little bit. And then we would open up to the room as a whole and have questions with you. Does that sound good? We good with that? Okay. I just want to check. In the room, like with a show of hands, French first, Français d'abord, vous êtes combien là dans la salle? Okay, so English first, vous êtes combien dans la salle? You English first. Hey, wait a second, I see some people putting their hands up twice. I love you guys, who's them? Okay, so we're about 50-50. Does that feel right?
Yeah.
À peu près 50-50. And I understand that we have, in the back, we have some people who don't really understand English so well. Il y a une traduction, c'est ça? All right, so what I'm going to try and do, je vais essayer de faire ça un peu bilingue là, comme on est à Montréal, un peu bilingue. If I speak in French, is there anybody here who doesn't understand French? Oh, we have some people admitting to it, I love it. Okay.
We're working on it, it's a work in progress.
I know, it's a beautiful language, it's very hard. Okay. So, all right, so I'm going to try and sort of, if you get lost, if we're in French and you start to feel a bit lost, do we have a solution for that, a whispered translation in the back? Okay.
I got my app open.
Okay, so sometimes we certainly will. Marie va parler en français, so there's going to be a time when we're going to move into French. All right, good. I just wanted to check ground rules with you. All right, and one last question then, and this is for the organizers. How much time do we have all together? When do we have to leave the room?
About 9:30, 10 o'clock. Take your time.
Okay, so what time do we want to leave the room?
Who has to relieve the babysitter?
Should we aim for 8:30? It's 7 o'clock. That's an hour and a half. That's a bit tight, but I think let's try. So let's work together and try. Okay, good. We're gonna try for 8:30. Sorry about that.
Okay.
If it gets really hot at 8:30, some people can leave and the others can stay. We can continue to cook. All right. So I'm gonna give myself 8 minutes, and also each one of us will present themselves because I don't know our presenter. So I'll start by presenting myself a little bit, and then I'll give myself 8 minutes, and then I'll have 2 minutes to wrap. And here's the horrible sound that we're going to hear. You're going to hear it when it rings. It's going to be nasty.
Can you also speak really loud?
Yeah. So can people hear me at the back?
Yes.
Okay. You know what? You can also feel free to move a little closer if you feel.
How do you think at the front, people?
Beaucoup de sièges ici en avant. On va déplacer les personnes qui ont déjà parti, qui sont là, qui vont être déplacées. All right. So my name is Jason Prince. I'm an urban planner. I'm a white, privileged white man. I have put together about 3 different books on problems facing the city. One of them was free public transit. So people think I'm an expert in free public transit. That's how it flies. Actually, most of what I learned was in this book, which is free on the internet, Red Bologna. Rush off and find the PDF. It is a brilliant description of a city in Europe that resisted. Let me start by just reminding us, I think that it was said that we're humans. Our scientists tell us that humans have been crawling the planet for about 200,000 years. we have maybe ancestors going back a couple of million years that are kind of ape-like type things that start walking on their feet. 200,000 years. So that means like if a baby was magically born from 200,000 years ago, today in the plateau, they would probably be on their telephone at the age of 8, playing video games. It's the same person. We have recorded history of about 8,000 years, 10. We can argue about that. So this animal has started to record in some way. We have archaeological evidence. And we have some writing and stuff like that. Until about 150 years ago, all of our urban settlements were built around walking, and maybe a little bit of horsey, and maybe some water, right? That's how we moved around in our settlements, all over the planet. But about 150 years ago, we made this amazing invention called the train. And for about 40 years, we also had a little detour with canal building, but trains was the second big transportation revolution. And we started to build train lines. In Montreal, we built a train line out, and what did we put at the end of it? Who remembers Belmont Park? Belmont Park. Oh yes, the laughing, horrible laughing lady in the haunted house. It was an amusement park. So the city started to look like a starfish. And we had like little villages built around each of the train stations. You got a picture?
Yeah.
And then we invented the... Can I drop an F-bomb?
Absolutely.
We invented the fucking car. And our city started to sprawl, like spewing garbage over nature. And the car companies, in consortium with the tire manufacturers and the oil which fuels the car, they bought up all of the, we all had tramways in all the cities in North America, tramways. Montreal had tramways all over, everywhere. And they systematically bought up these profitable private companies and dismantled them and replaced them with buses that get caught in traffic, in their traffic, in their car traffic. We have a commercial, it's the same commercial. It's, I'm in my SUV, I'm on the Rocky Mountains with my girlfriend, and just off camera, guess what we're doing? Wink, wink. Freedom. The reality of a car is that 90% of the time it's parked somewhere, costing something. It's the only asset that drops 50% in value the day you buy it, 2 minutes after you drive it outside.
And shoes.
It is a spectacularly stupid thing to own as a private individual. So, this is the backdrop to the question of the future of transportation in our cities. We have this beautiful map in this book. Imagine, our metro system is one of the best. It's really one of the best. And imagine you have heat maps. If you can get to the metro, you're in what you call, the red zone. Super excellent transportation. About 1 million people in in Montreal region have this access, very easy access to the metro system. They can go pretty well anywhere in the network. In their pajamas, in the wintertime, right? But then there's about 3 million in the region who are in the pink and then out into the black zone where there's no access whatsoever. So there's a map in here that shows this. And once you've seen it, you kind of understand. So the politics of our region, it's really complicated because you've got 3 million voters who want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want to have highways. They actually need highways. And they also want public transit. And they vote. And they vote, and who has power? Quebec City. And about 1 million of us, we use the metros. We're actually heavily, it's just part of our everyday life. Okay, adding to that is some buses. I think we've got now 31 high volume bus routes, right? We see them everywhere now, they're advertising. All right, so that adds another layer. There are 2,500 buses in the STM. All right. If we had free public transit tomorrow morning for everybody, it would be chaos. Like we don't have enough capacity. So we'd have to actually double, We'd have to double the number of buses first. And also we already know at rush hour our metro system is choked. When they opened the Montmorency line, which they expected to have, I forget the numbers, they had 3 times the volume that they expected. So that the metros coming in the summer, all those inner city stations we have to wait 2-3 metros to get to where you're going. All right, so that what happened when we opened up the Laval line. Public transit is extremely popular, and wherever you put it in, right, people use it. Now, about 30% of people, all the surveys across Canada show, about 30% of the people who drive to work in their car would take public transit if they had the option. This gives you an idea, right? So that's a large number of people. Okay. There's a portrait. I'm gonna turn the page now. Right now, there's 150 cities, give or take, that have free public transit for all the people, all the time. The biggest is the capital city of Estonia, Tallinn. It's about the size of Quebec City. Wow, isn't that great? It's extremely popular. It was actually an idea of the right-wing government there. The idea of free public transit came in the United States from the business owners of property downtown. They proposed free public transit to bring shoppers and workers into their downtown to make their real estate more valuable, and they would pay for it. They were happy to pay the tax for it. So this is, it's interesting. Free public transit for all people, all the time, about 150 cities. And then there's free public sometimes, so used more tactically. So let's say to relieve poverty. So all families, children, families with children, as a poverty measure, their children ride free. Or as an economic development measure. So we're going to make it free in the downtown core to bring, to make people come into the core and spend. Or or to relieve congestion. So it's free from 7 in the morning until 9. And then you try and relieve congestion that way. So you can use it as also tactically, free public transit, to do different things. The biggest experiment was in Chengdu in China, city of about 2 or 3 million, and they tried a tactical to reduce congestion. They tried a couple of hours, free, it didn't work. And the public transport authority said, we should have offered free breakfast too. It's hard to get people who drive out of their effing cars. So it can never be used alone. I'm going to end on this. You cannot use free public transit alone. You've got to use it with a bunch. That's a carrot. And then after you bring in the carrot, you've got to bring in some sticks. That means taxes on gas, taxes on kilometers, taxes on bridges. That means taking, parking, charging on parking. Taking space physically away from cars, so putting in reserve bus lanes that are grade separated, that are definitely, only for buses, they don't get stuck in traffic. So you've got to put in other measures at the same time. You put in a lovely carrot, and then you put in all these sticks, and maybe you can migrate people away. All right, there, I think I've tried to give you a framework. I've run out of time. I had my 8 minutes plus 2 to wrap. And now I'm going to ask Shirley to have a go. gonna set the timer for you, Shirley.
Hi, my name is Shirley DeWind. I work with ISWP, Indigenous Street Workers Project. I've been working with them for 4 years. They've been existing for 5 years in Montreal now. My position is a peer coordinator, and what I do for my position is we created jobs for homeless Indigenous who live on the street, and we created 6 positions, 4 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday, which basically we just take people from Milton and Park and on the areas that you see the Indigenous hang out. We help them with, well, they help clean up the area of the Milton and Park area and Mount Royal and Sherbrooke. We just basically pay them for cleaning up the area that they hang out at so that we can make the community happy and have a better understanding of our people, and so we can all get along. That's the question, sorry. Also, what else then? That's basically what I do with our project, and the other part is we teach them how to become outreach workers to get along with the other community in the Milton Park and Mount Royal area, so we can all function in a beautiful country. The experience and barriers we have within the city with the transit system is basically most of us come from a rural area, so we're not familiar with the buses, nor the fares, or the train system. So often we are, because we're homeless, we don't have money to go on the metro, and it's kind of impossible for us to like learn the new system when we come from like some of us come from way up north in Nunavut where we never heard of a bus or train station, so it's kind of hard when we come down here and we have to learn the system, and then we're always getting tickets because we don't understand it and no one teaches us. Well, we learned the hard way, but it would be nice if we could like have some sort of help with that explanation, like a bus ticket, if they can like lower the bus ticket system, or if they would be understandable, not give us such a high ticket range. Sometimes it could be like $100 to like $300 to $400, which I had in the past when I was homeless, from my past experience. Also, it is difficult because when they are down here in Milton and Mount Royal, often they have family that, since they moved the YMCA from Atwater to Dorval, they now have to travel from here to Dorval. And it is very difficult for some of them just to go see family because they are often stranded out there with STM will not allow them on the bus because they don't understand the situation. They don't, most of them do speak in Inuktitut or their other languages of Indigenous languages, and it's kind of hard for them to communicate considering it is Quebec and we have to be French speaking, which is another barrier which most of us have. And me, I'm learning my French, which is another barrier I'm running through, but I'm learning. And it's just, I would like for us, for STM to understand more of our Indigenous backgrounds and have more understanding for us to get along with them and work along with them if they have a chance to at least learn about our backgrounds of where we come from and how we deal with our situation. And it's just, if they would just have a better understanding of where we come from, and instead of judging us as alcoholics and drug addicts, as we are just lost, basically. We come down here, we don't know what to do, where to go, and then we just fall into a rough system where we could use help, but we're often thrown out from the STM on the streets because we're just trying to warm up, but they don't have any understanding that we don't know where to go most of the time, or there's lack of places to go, so they just throw us out. And also it's the fact that we're always often kicked off the bus when we're at Dorval, and it's really difficult to come back to a shelter when you don't have a bus ticket. Some of them do have bus tickets, but their bus ticket runs out, and the workers are like, no, we won't let you out, we need you to pay, but most of them just don't have the money or the financial assistance to actually get a bus ticket, so they just try to jump, and they end up usually getting kicked off and left somewhere among the highway, which they don't really know the city, so they're just stranded, which really often happens. And it's really frustrating, because often I get called and then I have to figure out how to get them back, which is most of the time we figure out how to get them here. And it's very difficult to deal with them with STM because they don't understand. They just give us a really hard time of being Indigenous. They just judge us, and it's very difficult. I wish they were just more open-minded towards us and more understandable. And I would like to work with them more and like, I don't know, have like a group session so that they can understand how to deal with us, so that we won't get angry at them, because often we get frustrated if they don't understand us. They get mad at us and throw us out where we're trying to explain our situation, and they don't have the time because we don't speak French, and it's very difficult. So it would be just like nice if they could just have more of an open mind and be understandable. I don't know what else to say. That's basically what I had to say.
It's a very important perspective, and thank you for sharing that. And we're going to come back to you in the questions in the next few minutes. All right. Marie, c'est à ton tour.
Ben, merci. Merci, bonsoir tout le monde. Moi, je suis venue parler ce soir de la lutte concernant la mise en accessibilité universelle des réseaux réguliers de transport collectif. Pour commencer, je voulais faire une montée à l'origine de ce concept-là, de l'accessibilité universelle. En fait, ça a commencé en 1954, aux États-Unis, où il y a des parents qui contestaient le fait que leur enfant était inscrit à une école spécialisée. Et la Cour suprême des États-Unis a donné raison aux parents en disant que d'être séparés, c'est pas égal. Fait que l'enfant, finalement, a été à l'école régulière. Après ça, en 1985, à l'Université de la Caroline du Nord, il y a un architecte et chercheur qui a nommé pour la première fois la question du design universel. Plus près de nous, en 1980, est née Société Logique, qui est ici à Montréal et qui a un rayonnement provincial. Eux, leur mission, c'est de promouvoir le design universel puis intervenir dans la création d'environnement universellement accessible. Au début des années 2000, c'était purement architectural. Mais après ça, on a décidé, ici à Montréal, de l'élargir, ce concept-là. Oui, les bâtiments, mais il y a toutes les autres, la question des aménagements. L'aménagement, soit à l'extérieur ou à l'intérieur des bâtiments, communication, programme de service, sensibilisation et formation. Pour vous aider à comprendre, je vais donner l'exemple d'une maison des cultures à Montréal. Bon, la maison, le bâtiment, il faut qu'il soit accessible. Mais si moi, je fais partie d'une troupe de théâtre, puis qu'on va donner des prestations à cette maison de culture-là, est-ce que la scène va être accessible? Est-ce que les loges le seront? Souvent, on construit des aménagements en pensant que les gens en situation de handicap vont être des utilisateurs, qui ne seront pas nécessairement des acteurs. Donc, il faut aussi penser à ça, tout rendre accessible, toutes les activités dans lesquelles les gens vont participer, les citoyens. Il y a aussi les communications. Je prends l'exemple encore de ma pièce de théâtre. Il va y avoir des communications sur le web, notamment. Est-ce que ça va être accessible pour toutes les personnes, quelles que soient tes capacités, entre autres les personnes aveugles qui utilisent une synthèse vocale? Est-ce qu'ils vont avoir accès à l'information? Et toute la question de sensibilisation, formation. Moi, ça m'arrive régulièrement, là. Je suis avec mon conjoint qui n'a pas de déficience. Je m'envoie, exemple, au restaurant où je réserve. Puis c'est moi qui tiens la carte de crédit. Puis je pose la question. Mais c'est pas à moi qui va répondre. C'est à mon conjoint qui, lui, il n'a pas de carte de crédit dans les mains. Fait que là, tu sais, ça fait que ça, c'est toute une question aussi de sensibilisation et ça fait toute la différence. Quand les gens, c'est toi qui leur parles, mais c'est eux autres qui parlent. Fait qu'au niveau de la définition de l'accessibilité universelle, ça veut dire quoi? C'est le caractère d'un produit, d'un procédé, service, information ou environnement qui, dans un but d'équité et dans une approche inclusive, ça permet à toute personne de réaliser des activités de manière autonome. Mais en transport, qu'est-ce que ça peut vouloir dire? Bien, c'est en fait un réseau d'autobus, de métro, des équipements comme la billetterie, les abribus et les informations qu'on peut retrouver notamment sur le web. Ben, c'est conçu dans un but d'équité puis dans une approche inclusive qui permet à toute personne d'utiliser les services et les infrastructures de manière autonome. Je n'ai pas besoin de quelqu'un d'autre pour aller prendre l'autobus, je suis capable de le faire, même les limitations. Même avec des limitations. Au niveau, toujours en transport, en aménagement et architecture, ben on prend l'exemple du métro. Le fait de retrouver des ascenseurs dans le métro, ben ça aide, oui, les personnes à situation de handicap en fauteuil roulant, mais ça aide aussi la personne âgée qui a une légère perte de mobilité ou les personnes ayant la fibromyalgie. Je pense aussi pour la place qui est prévue à l'intérieur des autobus pour les personnes en fauteuil roulant. Quand il n'y a pas de personne en fauteuil roulant, le parent peut mettre la poussette de l'enfant à cet endroit-là. On se souvient qu'auparavant, quand il n'y avait pas de place pour les personnes en fauteuil roulant, le parent n'avait pas d'autre choix de mettre la poussette dans l'allée, puis ça créait de la friction entre les usagers, ce qui rendait le déplacement plus désagréable. Au niveau des communications, ben, quand il y a des textes qui sont vulgarisés, ben, ça facilite la compréhension des personnes qui ont une déficience intellectuelle, mais également aux personnes qui ont un faible niveau de littératie. Puis toute la question de la sensibilisation au niveau auprès des usagers, la sensibilisation qui porte sur le respect du siège réservé pour les personnes à mobilité réduite. Ça comprend, c'est pas juste les personnes qui ont une déficience motrice, mais aussi celles, les femmes enceintes, les personnes aînées, les personnes qui ont des limitations temporaires à cause de chirurgie. Au niveau, pour ici à Montréal, l'accessibilité universelle à la STM particulièrement, ça a commencé vraiment au début des années 2000, vers 2003. Qu'est-ce qui fait? La conjoncture était favorable pour ça. En 2002, il y a eu le sommet de la Ville de Montréal. Ben ça, c'était le tout début de la ville, la gestion par arrondissement. Avant 2002, c'est que la ville centre qui décidait, puis envoyait les directives aux arrondissements. Aujourd'hui, c'est plus ça, les arrondissements ont des pouvoirs de gérance, et c'était le début, puis à ce moment-là, le maire, il a décidé de convoquer tous ses élus municipaux, des élus fédéraux et provinciaux sur le territoire de la ville, puis la société civile pour dire qu'est-ce qu'on fait ensemble, quel projet on se donne. Et parmi les priorités retenues, il y a eu celle de l'accessibilité universelle. Toujours en 2003, il y a eu un changement dans la loi sur les sociétés de transport, et c'est à partir de cette date-là qu'au CA de la STM, il devait y avoir un représentant des usagers du transport adapté pour que la haute direction puis le CA prennent des décisions en ayant en tête les besoins des usagers du transport adapté. Puis en 2005, il est arrivé une nouvelle loi assurant l'exercice des droits des personnes handicapées. OK.
2 minutes encore.
OK. Puis moi, j'étais préparée pour 15 minutes. Droits des personnes handicapées, puis ça disait que les sociétés de transport devaient faire des plans d'action visant à réduire les obstacles.
Moi, j'aimerais l'entendre sans avoir un rush.
Yeah, pas de rush. Take your time.
Là, aujourd'hui, on a fait la démonstration à la STM comme quoi que rendre accessible son réseau, le métro entre autres, c'était profitable pour tout le monde, pas juste pour les personnes, que c'était une nécessité pour les personnes en situation de handicap, mais une plus-value pour l'ensemble des usagers, pensions de famille, personnes aînées, les femmes, les personnes enceintes et les proches aidants. Au niveau des freins importants, c'est que le capacitisme est bien présent au Québec. Capacitisme, c'est la discrimination basée sur le handicap. L'accessibilité universelle, on l'a vu rapidement, ça vise à répondre aux besoins de tous, peu importe tes capacités. Mais on est encore dans une société où on applique les normes. Les normes n'égalent pas réponse aux besoins de tous. L'exemple, le REM. Le REM a appliqué la norme, la B65112. On se l'est fait répéter, mais ça donne un projet qui a coûté 8 milliards et encore ce soir, le lien souterrain entre la station de métro Bonaventure et la gare centrale n'est toujours pas accessible, après 8 beaux milliards de dollars. Ça fait que c'est pas un enjeu politique, l'accessibilité universelle, ça fait on en fait quand on a un peu d'argent, puis on est un peu plus sensibilisé, mais ça reste que c'est pas encore partout présent. Solution? C'est que la solution, c'est que plus on va être nombreux à revendiquer l'accessibilité universelle, plus ça va devenir un incontournable auprès des décideurs. Exemple, dernièrement, c'est une mobilisation citoyenne dans Saint-Michel qui a vu que la station de métro Saint-Michel faisait l'objet de travaux importants et qu'il n'y avait pas d'ascenseur. Fait qu'ils ont fait une pétition, ils ont envoyé une lettre. Et moi, en tout cas, je salue ce genre d'initiative parce que plus il va y avoir des initiatives comme ça, plus ça va forcer les autorités en transport à vraiment appliquer le concept de l'accessibilité universelle. Les grandes avancées, Les groupes communautaires promeuvent de plus en plus l'accessibilité universelle. Le réseau d'autobus est accessible. Il y a 27 stations de métro accessibles. Les communications web sont davantage accessibles. Les grands défis. Les grands défis, il y en a. C'est qu'il y a, premièrement, j'ai appris qu'à la fin du mois d'avril, la ministre Ville devrait annoncer la création d'une agence de mobilité durable au Québec, du Québec. C'est donc cette agence-là qui va déterminer quels devraient être les meilleurs projets de transport structurants. Pour chaque projet structurant, on va avoir une table des partenaires et c'est cette agence-là qui va avoir pour rôle d'assurer la réalisation des travaux. Concrètement, ça veut dire, puis ça, j'ai eu cette discussion-là avec l'attaché politique de la ministre il y a 2 semaines. Ça veut dire que, mettons, c'est l'agence qui va déterminer, mettons, dans l'Est de Montréal, ça prend un REM, c'est l'agence qui va faire la table de partenaires, puis c'est elle qui va déterminer avec qui elle va développer le projet. Fait que, actuellement, ce rôle-là, ici à Montréal, c'est la RTL. Fait que l'autre affaire, c'est que j'ai parlé qu'on avait 27 stations accessibles. Il y en a 5 en cours de travaux pour devenir accessibles. Après ça, on ne sait pas. Parce que comme c'est là, le gouvernement n'a pas annoncé ses intentions de poursuivre l'investissement en la mise en accessibilité du métro. Au niveau de la fiabilité des rampes d'autobus, c'est que tous les autobus sont accessibles, mais les rampes, ça ne marche pas tout le temps. Des fois, c'est mécanique, des fois, c'est le chauffeur, qu'on travaille bien fort. C'est quelque chose qui nous préoccupe. Puis, ça va passer vite d'un coup. Au niveau des arrêts des bus longeant les pistes cyclables, c'est que parfois, quand il y a des pistes cyclables qui longent les lignes d'autobus, on est très d'accord pour ça. Qu'est-ce qu'on dénonce? C'est que la ville, parfois, aménage les arrêts d'autobus qui ne sont pas sécuritaires pour les personnes en situation de handicap, entre autres les personnes en fauteuil roulant, quand ils veulent monter dans l'autobus ou descendre, ben, ils n'ont pas d'autre choix de faire ça en plein milieu de la piste cyclable. Fait que, voilà, excusez-moi, j'ai été gourmand dans le temps.
Je vais pas s'excuser les urbanistes, mais le dernier enjeu de planifier une piste cyclable à côté d'une sortie d'un autobus, c'est pas de l'urbanisme très fort, on peut accepter. Hein? Ok, merci beaucoup pour cette...
Oui, j'ai dépassé un petit peu, là.
Non, c'est pas grave. On passe maintenant à Ted. Ted Rutland. Oh, excuse me. I forgot that we had somebody visiting us from the outer side. Yes, how are you? Can you hear us?
Yes, I don't speak a lot of French, so I will make that disclaimer now. But yes, I've been listening along intently. Nice to see everyone. Today I'll be talking a bit about gentrification and the things that folks have been advocating for. I am also pro-public transit, but I'm very mindful of the ways in which the state can co-opt any and all movements. And so I recently graduated in 2021 from a master's and had the privilege of doing that research on gentrification and the tactics of the state, particularly on Black geographies. So I was born and raised in Rexdale, which is a community in North Etobicoke, and Etobicoke is one of the 6 boroughs that make up is now Toronto or Turcotte. So yeah, I'll be kind of using this case example of what happened and is happening in a community here called Little Jamaica, and I'll be kind of just highlighting some of the pieces around things that we can be really mindful of as we're doing transit advocacy. I'm also an artist, so it's similar, at least in my perspective, to the ways in which art can be, like, artists can be co-opted or used as a tool of the state to gentrify neighborhoods. I'm thinking of murals or street murals, or ways in which art festivals can be sponsored by big oil, but be claiming Black and Indigenous liberation. So just wanting to be critical of these movements and make sure that, we are hyper aware of the ways in which whenever we are advocating for things, the state can kind of get their teeth in and extract our labor and kind of twist it into something else. And so yes, I am jaded, but I am not trying to hide that. So I thought I would start with a case example, like I said, of Little Jamaica. But to really ground us, I think I'll take us back to the 1920s, much before I was born and probably before most of us in this space. But again, it's important to know our history to keep that intergenerational movement struggle alive. So in the 20s, students from the Black Caribbean were permitted to enter Canada on temporary visas. So immigration became more appealing to a lot of Jamaicans after 1962, leading to this surge of immigration between 1973 to 1977. And we saw by 1978 that immigration policies really favored independent immigrants and refugees over family class immigrants. Which it just basically means if you were single and young, they would favor you really over if you were married or had a family, like in this like heteronormative, nuclear family way, which kind of resulted in this decrease almost. So there was this wave of immigration to Jamaica and the Caribbean, and then it decreased again until a brief increase again in 1984 to 1994. So we see throughout the 20th century that Black individuals in Canada, particularly from the Caribbean, faced unfair treatment in the ways in which immigration was allowing folks in. And we're still seeing that today, right? There are good immigrants and bad immigrants. And the criminal justice system really perpetuates a lot of that same unfair treatment of folks. So as soon as you have anything on your record, it is a lot harder to integrate here, right? So we're experiencing a lot of higher arrests, conviction, and longer prison sentences within the Black community here in so-called Canada. And we see that in again those waves. And in the 60s, going a bit back, there was a bit of a anxiety or a trigger about like race, crime, public order, especially in Toronto or Turcotte, and we see that south of the border, like war on drugs, war on crime, really kind of started to come to north of the border here in so-called Canada. So the majority of these immigrants who were able to come to Canada from the Caribbean, but specifically Jamaica, were able to establish themselves and settle in what is now Bathurst Avenue, which was historically known as Blackhurst because of the Black diaspora being so present there, along with Jane and Finch, Rexdale, Regent Park, Oakwood, and of course Eglinton West, which we now know as Little Jamaica. So due to it becoming more and more densely populated with Jamaican and Caribbean communities, these concentration of Black communities and individuals did not kind of end up here by accident. We know that redlining and housing discrimination is present. And so these were some of the areas that folks were able to settle. So something I really like to highlight is the ways in which, when it comes to transit, we really have to I like to connect it back to the different social determinants of health, the different social services, be it housing, immigration, access to care. And so, and another piece here that it will all connect, I promise, that I think is important to highlight is the way in which Toronto Community Housing Corporation, or what is colloquially known as TCHC, has and continues to contribute to gentrification. So when I think of Toronto Community Housing Corporation, I'm like, oh yeah, welfare, housing, that is a good thing, I'm pro this. And then you start kind of getting into the nitty gritty and you see what their policies are, you see their histories, and you start to notice that there is such a tie to policing, and there is such a tie to displacement. And this is a really, it's a troubling fact, and I think it's similar when I get into the pieces around transit, because again, if these tools of the state to again co-opt our movements makes it hard to advocate sometimes when you're trying to be like, I am pro social housing, I am pro free public transit and accessible transit, but we see the ways in which they kind of co-opt that. So with Toronto Community Housing, they're the second largest social housing or welfare organization in the world, but the largest in Canada, and that's pretty major. So it sounds really good on paper, but we saw this increase, especially when it came to Regent Park, of promises within their mandates that if they are contributing to a revitalization project, which is just code for gentrification, from my understanding, that they, in their policy it says that if you get pushed out of your home, then you have a right to return, and you have that right to have at least some form of in-between housing still with TCHC. And while that sounds great, A, it's usually not happening. B, if it does happen, I really want us to think about the ways in which community is really important, right? So I grew up in Rexdale. If my family gets gentrified and goes to the other side of the city, say it's Scarborough, I'm getting displaced not only from my housing, even if I was given another house in this city, I am losing connections to community, I'm losing connections to these care economies, right? And so that's a really major part of the impact of gentrification, is these ways in which it is like what I like to call, or what I've seen called, a slow violence. Because gentrification, it doesn't seem like it's like, suddenly you're like, okay, like my neighborhood's so changed so quick. No, it's a trickle effect. It's a bit slow. You're gonna notice a Starbucks, which we are boycotting hopefully. You're gonna notice people jogging in your neighborhood, which is a classic joke in my community. You'll start noticing these little trickle effects of neighborhood shifts and changes that, again, once people are asking, like we're asking for accessible transit, and we're advocating for this, but at the same time, as they're bringing this transit in, they're pushing those people out. So who long-term gets to benefit from these neighborhood changes, from these revitalization projects? It's not the original or the long-standing community and resident members. It's the folks that they're waving into this as they're upgrading our communities. So when I'm thinking about transit gentrification, at least in Toronto's transit landscape, the TTC, or the Toronto Transit Commission, historically has been the primary provider of public transit. However, the introduction of fair enforcement officers has been enacting like privatization of this quasi-policing of our metro. And it has really transformed the public transit into another arena of policing, right? And so these fair enforcement officers collaborate with TPS to target and intimidate Black and lower income individuals, resulting in disproportionately high fines for fare evasion, sometimes leading to criminal charges. So when I'm thinking about a parking ticket, it's $30 to $50 usually. If you're in a zone that is, the highest you'll get is $150 in our city of Toronto. Yet when folks evade a fare, which right now is between, depending on your age, $3 to $3.75, their initial and main charge, if they get caught, is over $250. So again, we're seeing this as kind of like a war on marginalized and poor folks, right? Because that doesn't make sense. Because if I'm parking somewhere, which means usually I have access to a car and I have some kind of privilege, then it's $30 to $150, but most likely $30 to $50. But no matter what, we're starting at over $250 for evading a $3 to $4 fare. It's not adding up. And then when we're thinking about the history of Little Jamaica, these disparities in what is a long-standing advocacy in the community, and it's similar to Rexdale and Scarborough, where folks are like, the TTC sucks, right? The access to our transit is really limited. It's super constrained to the downtown core. They say the buses run every 10 to 15 minutes max, but as soon as you leave that core area of the city, you miss one bus, it'll be 45 to an hour wait for the next sometimes. And I'm sure it's similar in Jojage, right? It's a similar disproportionate effect on resourcing. And so I'd like to highlight Eglinton Connects, which was an LRT study that was conducted between 2012 and 2014. And I know that sounds a bit dated now, it's like 10 years ago, what? But the effects of this study are still being implemented today, which is why I wanted to bring this up. And I see that 2-minute warning, so I will speed round through this. But yeah, they focus on development and growth and revitalization across this 19-kilometer stretch of Eglinton Avenue, which proposed to 25 LRT stations intending to complete construction by 2020. Right? In the initial proposal, it was going to be a five-year process, but then they kept expanding it to 2020. So this started over a decade ago, and it's just wrapping as of this year. The construction started to wrap. So this was an over 10-year project, and what resulted in this construction was a massive blocking of the street. So if you were driving in Toronto trying to go across Eglinton, it was a disaster. And what this intersected with was Little Jamaica. And this really impacted the shop owners, this really impacted the residents, that really limited folks being able to access and even know about the long-standing community shops. And it really made it hard to get to, right? Like, as these things were under construction, the bus routes that were already there disproportionately slowed, and it was like a really, really troubling piece. And a lot of folks had to leave because they couldn't sustain a livelihood, even though they had been there for over 40 years, over 50 years. And so it's really important to think about the ways in which we're doing consultation in regards to public transit, because with Eglinton and the LRT, the study was aiming to show best ways to leverage public investment in this crosstown LRT, but the folks that they did their consultation with were private investors, were folks who were looking to have long-term condos, and there's a lot there that, again, those who have been there for generations were no longer able to stay or access any of this, right? And so now we're seeing, although Little Jamaica has become a historic site or a heritage site, that is after years of destruction of the community. And so again, it's having condos now there worth over $1 million, when generally speaking, the housing there at the time was nowhere near that tripled the amounts. And so just thinking, I just really wanted to highlight these things. I know I'm gonna wrap it up. I have so much more to say, but I will end it here. But just to talk about that slow violence of gentrification, where it is that trickle effect, and the ways in which transit itself, we need to be really mindful of the ways in which, if we're advocating for these things, those who are the advocates and those who are in community get to access the benefits of these changes, of this system change, right? And so, yeah, thanks for listening. It was a beautiful experience. To everyone, and so sorry again that I don't speak French, but I appreciate this.
Never apologize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Yaz. You're gonna stay with us, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, super. All right. Thank you very much for that contribution. I will now ask Ted to speak for some time.
For some time. Thanks.
10 minutes.
Thank you. Discipline. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here tonight. And thanks to the other presenters. I've learned so much from all of you actually before tonight, and just sitting with your ideas and analysis tonight has been really generative. I'm not often part of a panel around planning issues that I find very interesting at all, and I teach in a planning program. So one of the key things I think tonight is that infrastructure is not just a physical thing in the world, it's political, which means that it is shaped by all of the political and social structures of our society: capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, ableism, et ainsi de suite. And obviously...
Did you say racist?
I said colonialism and imperialism, but yeah,
Okay.
racism is the other way of talking about that. And obviously we can't sort of point that out, I think, in the present context without pointing to the ways that infrastructure is political in Palestine. And so a few things that I think are quite well known to everyone, but I want to point out, is that the occupation of Palestine from 1948 onward was an infrastructure project. Israeli towns and cities were built on bulldozed Palestinian towns and cities from which people were displaced. An entire infrastructure of occupation, apartheid, and necropower was built across Palestine, which is most visible in the West Bank, where, as many of you know, if you're an Israeli citizen living in one of the illegal settlements in the West Bank, there's an amazing infrastructure for you. You can move very quickly and through on roads, and you can take buses. If you're Palestinian, it can take 2 to 4 to 6 hours just to make it 5 kilometers, because you're moving through a separate infrastructure and moving through checkpoints that are there to make your movements as inefficient, as humiliating, and energy sapping as possible. And then, of course, the destruction of Palestinian infrastructure has been an ever-present part of the occupation and settler colonialism in Palestine from the get-go and until today. Before October 7th, we had Israel ripping up roads in Gaza as punishment. So you can no longer drive on them, but when you have rainfall, you can't walk on them either. And among other things that the current genocide is doing is, of course, killing many people, but it's also committing what some people call herbicide, which is destroying cities, which means killing people, but also destroying the form of life and the physical infrastructure of cities. And so everything that supports urban life is being decimated. And so we can't talk about infrastructure and transit, I think, without talking about what it would take for Palestinians to have infrastructure, to have a way of being able to get around the world. And then finally, infrastructure is part of our resistance. April 15th, Monday, I think was one of the more beautiful global days of action and solidarity with Palestinian people, where people were blocking roads, blocking railways, blocking ports. And as a sign on the Golden Gate Bridge, which was blocked in solidarity with Palestine, said on Monday, "Stop the world for Gaza." And so I think that we need to be thinking about our struggle in these terms as one that is international, and as one that thinks about where we have power. As Nicholas said at the beginning, it's like voting or like telling our politicians what we want. Do that, obviously, but we can't expect the kinds of just world that we want to come through that. Okay, so I want to try to make a link, as some other folks have done, Shirley notably, Marie as well, and Yasmine, between transit and the police. And so the first very broad point is to say that we live in a neoliberal society and a carceral society, and we have been for 40 years, which means that it's very, very difficult to have social goods and social programs funded, so including transit, and it's very, very easy to find new money for the police, prisons, surveillance, borders, etc. And that's not just a sort of a financial relationship, that defunding of social programs and social goods and the superfunding of police, it's also an ideological one. One of the ways that we withdraw social goods from people is by criminalizing them. And so, for example, what's the problem right now in metro stations? It's unhoused people who are making us unsafe. Rather than unhoused people who are unsafe, they're the most vulnerable people in our society because we have dispossessed them of a home. So rather than prioritizing their safety, we're seeing them as a source of unsafety. So criminalization makes it possible for us to withdraw social goods, social aid, and social support from people. And when we're talking about transit justice or climate justice, we're trying to recenter a social project where we're thinking about how not to just live more ecological lives as ourselves as individuals, but how to work together to make it possible for all of us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within the society and globally. We can see this neoliberal carceral relationship within the government of Projet Montreal, especially since 2020, when people were in the streets demanding the defunding of the police, when the majority of Quebecers supported defunding the police, and when 72% of Montrealers supported defunding the police. Since 2020, Projet Montreal has increased the police budget more than any other city in Canada, more than any other government in the history of Montreal. It's the most far-right and anti-Black and anti-Indigenous public security policy in Canada. And they've done that at the same time as withdrawing money for social supports. And so last year, Projet Montreal axed its program that funds street outreach workers, travailleurs de rue, and support workers. So 30 workers who support unhoused people are going to lose their jobs between now and 2025. So we are superfunding the police, we are withdrawing funding from social supports. And then finally, we can see this in terms of transit. In the last 2 years, as we know, the Transit Authority, the STM, has had trouble, meeting its budgetary projections. And so the STM had a revenue shortfall of about $60 million in each of the last 2 years, and Projet Montreal forced them to cut staff in order to make up for that shortfall. In those same 2 years, the SPVM, or police department, went over budget by $60 million each year, which is the same thing, and the Projet Montreal just cut them a check. And they'll continue to go over budget because they go over budget every year. They're the only police force in Canada that goes over budget every single year. And so if we care about transit justice, if we care about climate justice, if we care about social justice, we need to think about this overinvestment in the police, both because of the way that it represents this kind of individualizing, criminalizing process, and because it's a real impediment to the money we need and the collective vision we need to make a better world. And so, I'm very much in favor of defunding the police, reinvesting in various kinds of social programs and community programs that actually keep us safe, that actually meet our needs. But I want to talk about that specifically in relation to this sort of ever-renewing crisis about unsafety in the metro system. And so that sort of little crisis began in 2021, over which time we've seen a small increase in violent crime in metro stations since 2021. We are at historic lows in terms of crime and violence in metro stations. There's been a downward trajectory since the early 1990s, but we've had a little spike in the last 2 years, which we should be worried about, we should try to do something about, but it's very small. Most of what people are talking about when they're talking about safety problems in the metro is just the presence of unhoused people, the presence of people who use drugs, the people who are experiencing mental illness, who are the most vulnerable people in our society to violence and crime, but we're casting them as a security threat to the average person. Since 2021, we have seen a massive increase in policing in the metro stations. So the STM has increased the number of constables spéciaux from 170 to 200. It's increased funding for security by $50 million. That's a ton of money, while axing staff and services for transit. They've hired 20 security ambassadors, which is a title that they borrowed from actually a really good program in Los Angeles, where like non-cops try to like support people and meet their needs in metro stations. The security ambassadors in the STM, as far as I can tell.
Wait, what's the title?
Security ambassadors.
Oh, okay.
All I've ever seen them do is stop racialized people when they think they haven't paid their fare. The police have increased their presence in metro stations, and then we have these bizarre mixed squads where the police will patrol with people who call themselves social workers but who are not, like this program called Aequo. And they're viewed as like helping unhoused people. They're helping put them outside. That's the help they're offering. And so what can we do instead? I don't have time to go into it, but
Go into it, Ted.
well, I wrote a thing for Le Devoir on Monday, if you read French, called Pour un métro sanctuaire. And it draws from a report from the really great group called ACT LA, Association for Community Transit LA, where they're calling for metro stations to become sanctuaries where people can get their needs met. And so rather than kicking people out who have unmet needs, obviously we need to provide for their needs elsewhere too. If they need a home, we need to provide that. But we can also meet people's needs in metro stations, as the Indigenous Support Workers program does, for example. Massive investments in street outreach workers and support workers could be provided so that people have their needs met in metro stations. In LA and Philadelphia, they're also creating social services hubs within metro stations, including safe consumption sites for drugs. Rather than keep kicking people out, think about what it would mean for everyone who's there to belong and for them to have their needs met. And then finally, we need to get out of this model where we think that somehow if we just have enough cops, we will never be uncomfortable and we will never be in danger. So much of what happens in metro stations is we feel insecure. Many transit authorities are doing public education to help people understand the difference between something that just makes you feel uncomfortable and a genuine threat. And training in sort of like bystander intervention. So if something happens, we don't just stand there. We have an instinctive response that's actually productive to try to diminish a conflict or de-escalate a conflict. We could be carrying naloxone. There's all kinds of ways that we could be keeping safe. There is no number of cops that we could have where we will never have something happen in our surroundings. There are some basic things that we need to be able to do, and we can do this socially rather than just we can all go and learn this on the internet tonight if we don't know it already, but ideally this would be a social project where we keep each other safe, which is another way.
Oh my God, it's an interesting set that we have to work with here. So my horrible job is to try and find a way to connect all of these stories, or to try and we're going to try and move the conversation forward and try and find some blending a little bit. All right. Should we move into like a little circle here? Would that be more intimate? So we're going to come around. So we're going to start to break down the space between us. Yeah. We're going to steal this chair. That should be good. All right, and Yaz, you're going to join us? You're going to show your face?
Yes, just 1 second. I'll be on screen in a second.
All right. Okay. Let me try to review a little bit what happened. All right, so let's start with gentrification. So it seems to me gentrification. I think we have to. I'm gonna give a bit of extra information here. There's an excellent book by a guy called Samuel Stein called Capital City, and he helped me to understand gentrification. I'm gonna try and share this with you. We remember in North America, we used to do something called manufacturing. We used to make things, right? We used to sew clothes. We had 200,000 jobs in clothing manufacturing here in Montreal. But you know, the world economy restructured. So all of our areas, our industrial areas in all of our cities in North America and other parts of the global north, they start to migrate. First to Mexico, China, Asia. Industrial capital left the cities that we know. All right, that made a vacuum. Okay, listen up now. A vacuum. Three vacuums. A capital vacuum, right? So suddenly a large part of capital employing people leaves our cities. It creates a spatial vacuum. Huge parts of our city are now empty. They're literally dead, rotting carcasses of old industrial activity. And the third is a political vacuum. And it's important to understand this. 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, there were two capitals in the city, Samuel Stein argues. There was an industrial capital that wanted to keep housing prices low because then they wouldn't have to pay wages. And we had a housing capital that wanted people to pay more for housing. With the vacuum, when industrial capital leaves, there's no countervailing power. There's no other power. So housing capital has a monopoly, he says, an almost monopoly on city policies. And so gentrification should be understood then in this context. It's a very important lesson. You can go and watch YouTube videos where he does a much better job than I just did. But understand that this is a deep tissue problem, and it's not going away. It's accelerating. And it's very powerful. Okay, so understanding what's going on in our cities from that perspective helps us to understand. All right.
I think you did great.
Okay. We have over here the possibility of a source of funding for free public transit if we take money away from police.
Yeah.
And we have a number of other things we can do with some of that money. One of it is social services integrated maybe into the public transit system. And also money for capital projects like increased physical accessibility to the systems that we have. But don't forget that in the background is the problem. We have this huge problem, the sprawling problem, which is that most of the people living in the Montreal region don't have any public transit to speak of, and it would be very challenging to successfully service that sprawled city with buses. It would be wildly expensive and practically very difficult. So I think I'm just sort of summarizing where we got to. All right, now a question. What do we do with this mess?
Defund the police.
It's not really a proper source of money, is it?
I mean, I don't. There's a complicated thing, right? Because we throw all this money at the police and we hope we get safety in return. We don't.
Right.
We probably should be defunding and investing in things that actually keep us safe.
Yeah.
Rather than, we can't just like abolish the police and fund transit. I think that would be a bad idea. But there's so many ways in which like investing in transit actually keeps people safe. Like people are like, oh, ridership is down because it's not safe in the retro. It's like, that's the exact opposite relationship. People feel insecure because ridership is down. This has been shown. Like one of the ways that you can make people feel safe and actually be safe is just get people into metro stations, get people on transit. And so like free transit is actually one way of making metro stations safe. There's just gonna be more people there. Mm-hmm. But we obviously need other sources of money. I mean, and you pointed to those sticks are also sources of money.
They are. So gas taxes, all those kinds of extra taxes, like the carbon tax, right? Who feels they understand the carbon tax? A couple of people. Canada has a carbon tax outside, and that money that they raise from the carbon tax is going to go back to the taxpayers with a direct cash $500 checks, coming in. Here in Quebec,
Québec, on a un autre système.
on a un autre système. Ici au Québec, on a un cap and trade system. So the money that gets raised from the cap and trade system largely goes to finance energy improvements in other big capitalist outfits. There's 100. Last time I checked, there were 100 big corporations that play in the game, and they some of them improve, and the other ones pay for their pollution. And then there's a little bit of money that comes out of it that goes into the green fund. That is from the sale of some of these credits. So there's a bit of money that comes in, but it's being stupidly used. The CAC actually proposed to build like a third link for cars, like totally stupid. So all right.
Yeah, is that not greenwashing? Sorry.
Oh no, that's deeper. That's green stupid. That's like stupid. That's just big stupid. That is.
Greenwashing?
No, it's worse, much worse. It's just stupid. That's just doesn't even get the word green on it. Okay. 20 minutes left. 20 minutes left. These people have questions or comments. Should we go? Should we move straight? I think so. I think they got things to say. Let's move into conversation. Who has a question for anybody here? Je vois quelqu'un ici. Par la suite, toi. You.
Je trouvais un petit peu l'aliment pénible parce que, bon, 80% et plus des interventions sont en anglais. Et puis, bon, là, je me suis rapproché parce que j'ai une certaine compréhension de l'anglais, mais elle est limitée quand même. Et puis, je dois dire qu'il y a des interventions que je n'ai pas du tout saisies, ou très, très peu, là. Je sais que la dame ici, autochtone, elle se faisait mettre, ou ces gens se faisaient mettre en dehors des stations de métro. Et je ne sais pas exactement pourquoi, dans quelles circonstances, je n'ai pas bien compris. Ensuite, il y a celle à l'écran là, qui était de Toronto. Je n'ai pas vraiment compris ses propos, là, je dois dire. Là. Donc, il faudrait résumer un peu là, pour que je retourne dans la conversation.
Mais on a parlé de problèmes là, pour les Autochtones qui n'ont pas de maison. Là. On est maintenant hébergés là, à Dorval, mais la communauté, c'est dans les quartiers centraux, alors se déplacer, c'est coûteux. Les gens ne parlent pas, les Autochtones ne parlent pas français, largement. Alors il y a une mécompréhension aussi, culturelle, mais aussi entre autres choses. Là. Alors c'est une friction constante, et puis c'est pas normal la réponse étatique aux enjeux là.
Oui, c'est ça. C'est le fait qu'ils envoient à Dorval, puis qu'ils n'ont pas assez de transport en commun, puis ils n'ont pas l'argent non plus pour
c'est ça.
Et il y a la discrimination.
Oui.
Et discrimination, oui. Puis aussi abus des policiers, toutes sortes de problèmes qu'on connaît très bien, je crois, on a vu là, dans nos quartiers. Là.
Et puis les problèmes à Toronto.
Et à Toronto, là, on parle de... C'est plus compliqué, c'est une histoire d'un milieu, là, qui date depuis 100 ans, qui est maintenant menacé. Je vais le summariser, là, par une gentrification, puis on va tuer un peu de cette communauté par une infrastructure qui est mise en place par la ville, qui va probablement tuer largement l'économie de cette partie pendant que les tours de condos vont être construits, un peu comme ce qui passe à Chinatown ici.
Et la communauté aussi.
Oui, j'ai pas dit tout, mais juste on a terminé sur ça. So, merci. Désolé, là, c'est complexe. En place, c'est aussi pas de très bonne leçon.
Moi, je voulais savoir, à Tallinn, en Estonie, c'est quoi la dynamique économique? Quelle forme ça prend, vu que c'est pas l'utilisateur qui paie pour l'autobus, le chauffeur, l'essence ou le gaz? C'est qui, d'où vient l'argent? Est-ce que ça vient quand même de l'utilisateur à travers ses taxes et ses impôts? Finalement, c'est encore l'utilisateur qui le paye. Je veux comprendre mieux la dynamique.
C'est les payeurs de taxes municipales. Tallinn, c'est intéressant parce que c'est comme ici, il y a beaucoup de gens qui viennent de banlieue pour travailler. Après, ils ont adopté, c'est 20% que les usagers ont payé. Si on prend, ici c'est 55% à peu près que les utilisateurs payent pour le métro, les opérations de métro, de système de transport. Alors là, c'est moins. Alors quand ils ont adopté la politique de gratuité, les gens ont déménagé à l'intérieur de la ville. Alors la population a augmenté et les gens, ils ont venu pour profiter de ça parce que c'était juste pour les gens vraiment du talent, pas les banlieues. Alors les gens ont déménagé et en effet, après la poussière est tombée, une étude démontre que they actually made money. Ils ont fait plus d'argent. Le système est maintenant dans le noir, pas déficitaire. C'est un excellent exemple de comment regarnir, on peut dire, une ville. Mais attention, parce que c'est aussi un effet de gentrification. Hein. But people will move in, if we do it here, people will move in, and where are the poor people? They're close to our metro system, and they're going to be displaced. So we have to be very careful about it, doing these things. On doit être, it's politics. It's a political process. It's very important to understand. Oui.
Mais merci beaucoup pour vos présentations. C'est intéressant parce que c'est vraiment une forme perspective, un point de vue donc, sur l'accès et l'équité au niveau du transport public, et plus largement aussi. Puis vous parlez d'aller chercher des fonds dans la police, d'aller chercher des fonds dans la police, et plus au niveau municipal. Je pense qu'il faut aller chercher au niveau provincial. Parce que les villes, présentement, avec l'adaptation au changement climatique, déjà, ils manquent de budget. Ils ont eu des budgets, mais c'est pas grand-chose. Donc, puis je me souviens plus, là, j'avais déjà vu un tableau à un moment donné qui comparait vraiment combien ça coûtait au niveau du gouvernement pour faire les routes, par personne, versus le transport collectif. Parce qu'on dit toujours transport collectif gratuit, sur l'avant-là, ça coûte trop cher. Mais finalement, c'est les routes qui coûtent plus cher. Puis ceux qui n'ont pas de voiture, c'est pas injuste pour ceux qui n'ont pas de voiture, c'est un peu injuste qu'ils s'en vont à payer ça. Donc, si on va avoir la même logique, il faudrait qu'il y ait plus de transport collectif partout au Québec. Puis aussi, il n'y a pas juste la crise climatique. Dans certains pays, ils vont militer aussi beaucoup sur au niveau des coûts de santé, des particules fines aussi qui sont nocives pour la santé. Donc, ils mettent ça aussi dans le portrait, c'est des coûts, donc il y a des coûts de santé aussi d'avoir des voitures.
Dans le débat à Montréal, il y a des années, là, on avait toute une panoplie d'économistes. À Toronto, il y a un économiste qui démontre les impacts mesurables avec chiffrés, tu vois. Et là, ça c'est puissant comme argument, là. Mais on a raté ça à Montréal dans le débat quand c'était mené la première vague là.
Il y a tout le réseau de tramway aussi. Là. Il y a des bonnes nouvelles dernièrement, ça va se développer. Oui. On entend. Donc,
So, oui. Regarde, je vais dire quelque chose là. So the problem with the carbon cap and trade system in Quebec is that it generates some money into the fond vert, but it's not, we don't control it. Et puis, the problem with the federal one is it brings money back into the taxpayer, which is great politics. But the problem I think we have, if we're going to do something like a big scale, serious pivot towards collective transport, public transit, it's going to need a carbon tax that goes directly into the collective transport system on a massive scale. We're talking about billions and billions that come directly from those sources. And finding that, like, why is it that the two systems we're playing with in Canada are not actually funding the solution to the automobile? That is a power question, a deep power question that perturbs me. That lobby is the short answer. Like the car lobby power, oil car power lobby is still so powerful. They control the conversation and they direct behind the scenes. And unless we notice, unless we try to see that and really try and focus the thing. But it's more complicated because of all the people who have no choice. We built our cities almost creating a fate. It's very frustrating. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I guess My question is probably more specifically for Ted and Yas, but I think I probably have thoughts as well, and it's just thinking about the issue of needing to expand public transit, to invest in it so that it is accessible, so that it is meeting people's needs, so that people are welcome and like shown directions, and it being a space that is social and community. How do we balance the push for these improvements and reinvestment while balancing against sort of the neoliberal push for like continued expansion that ultimately leads to gentrification, or sort of that like continued colonialism that we're kind of seeing Hydro-Quebec push for in terms of wanting to own more lithium mines and just continued extraction and sort of the destruction of the rights of the nations whose land it is.
Mm-hmm.
Great question. Thank you.
Yes, do you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really important and critical question. So thank you for asking it. And I think when thinking about this, I've been thinking about this a lot actually. And for me, I'm finding that in the organizing work I'm doing and have done, that the difference between actual community repair and being able to improve and upgrade your community to meet folks' needs, and gentrification is being able to stay where you're at and still get those improvements, right? And so that's a really significant difference, and I think sometimes people conflate oh, our house is not allowed to be redone, or our shop's not able to move in, and I think that isn't the issue. The issue is at what cost? At the cost of folks being pushed out. And I think when it comes to that neoliberal expansion you're talking about, and even what our facilitator and moderator has been speaking about, of where did the walkable cities go? Where have this the invention of the car and the invention of all this having to at least in Toronto, it's a big problem of the GTA or the GTHA, and how there is a pull to need to come into this metropolitan area that is Toronto, and the lack of localized, sustainable economies, right? And that's because that's going deeper into globalization, that's going deeper into the impacts and the ripple effects that we're seeing because of neoliberalism. And honestly, I think that's a collective question, but my instinct perhaps is just really needing that localized movement and moving into not only knowing your neighbors, being able to show up for each other, right? And that's what other panelists have been talking about, right? Is that we keep a safe mentality that has come out of so many movement struggles, but especially Black movement struggles. And I think something, not to take your question and go on a tangent, but to say that I feel I'm oh, that's such a major question that I'm that I'm really energized by that, because I've been thinking about it too. And honestly, I think something that we have to be evaluating, at least in how I'm thinking about movement strategy, is the really fast-paced increase of surveillance, some of the folks in the space have been talking about, because I think we're forgetting that with the normalization of AI and popular culture, and I'm not even talking about ChatGPT, I'm talking about any type of artificial or computerized intelligence, that a lot of our tactics of safety and showing up for each other have been able to be I don't know the word, but corrupted, and or gotten to this point where they are able to keep us in this space of fear. And I think when it comes to how do we organize in a way for public transit
Yes. Oh, two, we've got three. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Oh, excusez-moi. Non, toi d'abord. Et par la suite, lui, et par la suite, France.
Quand tu dis toi, c'est qui?
C'est toi.
C'est moi?
Oui.
C'est bon. Ok, je vais essayer de rassembler mes idées. Là, il est tard, puis j'ai quand même... Merci beaucoup pour vos présentations. Merci d'avoir organisé la soirée. Tu sais, quand on parle du transport en commun, c'est vraiment pas... L'argument économique, pour moi, il tient pas la route. De dire qu'on n'a pas l'argent. L'argent est là, il est à Québec. Effectivement, l'argent, il faut aller chercher au gouvernement provincial parce qu'il y a de l'argent pour plein d'autres affaires. Fait que, notamment des usines à batterie électrique. Ça, il y en a de l'argent pour ça. Fait que c'est vraiment de shifter notre... c'est un projet de société, puis je pense qu'éventuellement, même le politique n'aura pas le choix d'aller vers ça parce qu'on ne peut pas électrifier tout le parc automobile. Il va falloir produire combien d'électricité, faire combien de nouveaux barrages, combien de mines. Fait que, c'est un projet qui est voué à l'échec. Puis pour moi,
Un
c'est
barrage.
Hein?
Un barrage supplémentaire moyen.
C'est...
Tu parles de doubler la capacité. Tu parles de doubler la capacité.
Ça me dérange.
Ouais.
Pardon?
Tout ce que j'ai entendu, c'est que tu parlais de doubler la capacité.
Oui, c'est ça. Et là, si on parle du Québec, c'est de doubler, il faudrait doubler ce qu'on a actuellement en capacité énergétique. Là. Donc, ça ne fonctionne pas. Puis moi, je pense que c'est utopiste de penser qu'on va pouvoir continuer comme ça. Je sais que le changement, c'est lent, mais on n'aura pas le choix d'arriver à ça. La dame l'a mentionné, ça coûte beaucoup plus cher à la société de subventionner la voiture, c'est les routes, puis aux individus aussi. Fait que je souhaite qu'on y parvienne, puis quand on nous sert l'argument économique, ça coûte pas mal moins cher de financer et d'investir dans le transport en commun que le statu quo actuel. Alors, je pense que c'était ce que je voulais dire. Merci.
Je vais juste checker le temps parce qu'il est maintenant 8h27. Alors, moi, je vois après 5 personnes qui veulent poser des questions. Est-ce qu'on se plie un tout petit peu? On va aller à 8h45. Oui, OK? Est-ce qu'on est OK avec ça?
Tu dois quitter. T'avais dit dans une demi-heure?
Mais on va
Il faut voir qu'on t'a été guidé. Ouais. OK. Fait que dans 20 minutes, Marie va falloir qu'elle parte.
OK. Vous pourriez rester juste à 8h45? OK. On va essayer terminer à 8h45. OK. Alors, sur ça. Maintenant, toi, France, il y a 2 ici. Alors, toi.
Je vais essayer d'être synthétique. On n'a pas beaucoup de temps, mais en fait, moi, j'essaie de réfléchir et je pense que c'est un des objets aussi de la soirée, aussi comment y arriver et comment réussir à faire un mouvement collectif.
Oui.
Pour réussir à advenir au moment où on puisse mettre une pression autant sur la question du développement du transport, mais pour moi qui est plus la question de l'accessibilité. Je pense que c'est vraiment la question du cash qui est centrale et qui est une des manières dont généralement des mouvements sur le transport en commun ont une capacité de mobilisation. Et je regarde autant au Québec qu'à l'échelle internationale, souvent la hausse des tarifs ou des petits trucs comme ça, c'est la manière dont des gens un peu isolés en fait peuvent s'approprier ce rapport-là au transport en commun et pas sentir que c'est quelque chose sur lequel ils n'ont pas beaucoup de pouvoir, contrairement disons à des revendications de une ligne qui est coupée ou des questions de qualité, disons, des investissements comme la CAQ a fait là, qui coupe un peu l'investissement. Donc, en fait, je me demandais comment réussir, en fait, dans les prochains mois, prochaines années, à penser cet enjeu-là de la mobilisation, à voir ce qui s'est fait, que ce soit en Amérique du Sud, justement au Chili, à Sao Paulo, au Mexique, comment les mobilisations qu'il y avait eu au Québec dans les années 70, quand il y avait des hausses de préscolarité, ou des plus grosses manifs étudiantes, c'était pour la gratuité du transport en commun en 75, que les premières manifs étudiantes dans les années 55, c'était aussi pour le transport en commun gratuit, et de voir en fait comment réussir aujourd'hui à utiliser cette question-là du transport en commun qui lie la question économique du capitalisme, qui lie la question aussi de la crise environnementale, et sans rentrer justement dans un truc simplement du développement de l'infrastructure de transport en commun pour juste faire grandir la métropole et avoir juste plein de REM qui coûtent vraiment trop cher pour le monde et qui font juste en sorte que les bourgeois des banlieues peuvent faire des allers-retours entre la ville-centre puis ici. Fait que j'essaye de voir dans les prochaines semaines, dans les prochains mois, comment en faire un enjeu et comment réussir à... Et c'est ça que j'espérais, c'est peut-être une question aussi pour le monde qui organise la soirée, de qu'est-ce qui s'en vient et comment penser ça, quel type de coalition peut être née, qui n'est pas une coalition de papier, mais une coalition qui propose quelque chose à faire. Parce que je pense qu'il y a quand même une attente à plusieurs niveaux et que plusieurs groupes, plusieurs communautés, je pense, sont prêts à se mettre en mouvement.
Excellente question. Est-ce que tu veux une réponse? Mais peut-être
moi,
une réponse.
ça va compléter un peu la question, le commentaire, je dirais. Parce que ce que j'ai entendu, ça m'interpelle énormément. Mais moi, j'ai l'impression, merci tout le monde. Il y a des enjeux importants. Et pour moi, c'est comme si très, très humblement, c'est comme si on débutait une conversation. Puis moi, je me demande, Justice climatique Montréal, quel autre pas faudrait faire pour poursuivre cette conversation-là et puis aller vers des choses plus concrètes. Puis ce matin, juste pour dire, le Front commun pour la transition énergétique, il y a une campagne transport. Ruben, c'était là ce matin. Moi, je me suis joint à la table transport. Donc, il y a quelque chose qui se passe aussi de ce côté-là, mais c'est Québec. Donc, c'est l'ensemble du Québec. Alors, comment faire évoluer, contrer la culture du char qu'on a développée dans les X dernières années, comme Jason l'a bien illustré, puis comment peut-être viser de diminuer le parc automobile au moins de la moitié d'ici X années. Donc, oui, c'est quoi la suite? Moi, ma question, c'est ça, là. Puis, merci énormément, ça a amené les réflexions de mon côté, des choses auxquelles je ne pensais pas du tout. Là. Merci encore.
Marie, veux-tu?
Par rapport, tu sais, quelques interventions j'entends par rapport à l'aspect économique du transport collectif, puis on n'a pas cette donnée-là, mais à quelques reprises, la Chambre de commerce du Grand Montréal est sortie publiquement avec des études qui disaient que d'avoir un transport collectif structuré, c'est un créateur d'emplois, puis les employeurs ont besoin de transport collectif structuré pour que justement leurs employés, puis c'est attractif pour embaucher, recruter du personnel. Fait que ça, je trouve ça assez fort. Puis personnellement, je suis étonnée, voyant, tu sais, le fédéral n'a pas investi dans le transport collectif, dans le budget, puis le provincial non plus. Je suis quand même étonnée de ne pas entendre les chambres de commerce sur l'absence d'investissements gouvernementaux dans le transport collectif, d'une part, puis aussi, j'ai déjà été témoin d'une étude que la STM avait faite parce qu'elle donne des contrats, hein. Oui, elle reçoit de l'argent du gouvernement du Québec, mais avec cet argent-là, elle donne des contrats. Puis c'était une part importante de contrats qu'elle donnait dans différentes compagnies à travers le Québec. Puis ça pouvait être des morceaux d'acier au Saguenay, des tuyaux de l'Outaouais. C'est créateur d'emplois. Puis aussi, j'avais vu une étude, ça je l'ai toujours pas loin de mon classeur, sur chaque dollar investi en transport adapté, combien retournait dans l'économie. Pour chaque dollar investi qui vient du gouvernement, qui investit dans le théâtre, 3 $ revient dans l'économie. Moi, je leur ai arrêté de parler de dépenses. C'est un investissement. Fait que c'est ça, mais il y a quand même des données.
Juste une réponse. Juste un drôle d'ami dans la région de Montréal, c'est le Chambre du commerce métropolitain de Montréal, qui ont fait non juste une, mais 2 énormes études d'impact économique pour favoriser le transport en commun. Là, c'est weird. Et c'est toujours Michel Leblanc, qui était le chef de ces 2 études, toujours en place. Alors, c'est un allié pour notre milieu. L'argument économique est fort. OK, on a 2 questions ici. Oh.
Je veux dire, ils ont interpellé Justice climatique Montréal directement. J'espère que ça ne dérange pas, je prends 10 minutes pour répondre. Écoute, c'est pas 100% clair c'est quoi les prochaines étapes qu'on va faire. Qu'est-ce qui est clair, c'est qu'on doit être radical, on doit être très audacieux dans les perspectives qu'on va avoir. C'est quelque chose qu'on a vécu avec le mouvement climatique. C'était beau d'avoir 500 000 personnes dans les rues de Montréal, mais tout ce qu'ils demandaient au gouvernement, c'est faites quelque chose sur le climat. Tant qu'à moi, c'est une demande qui vaut absolument rien parce que ça donne rien comme réponse. Quand on demande au gouvernement de donner plus au transport en commun, quand on travaille dans une façon où c'est quand à la défense, parce que le gouvernement ne veut plus investir dans les transports en commun, il faut être à l'attaque. Puis l'attaque, c'est de comprendre tout le monde dans notre mouvement. Ça veut dire les personnes handicapées, ça veut dire les personnes autochtones, ça veut dire les personnes marginalisées. Puis c'est de se retrouver dans des pièces où ce qu'on n'est pas juste tous des technocrates blancs qui parlent de comment un système doit faire plaisir à un gouvernement. Si on leur donne la bonne étape pour avoir des tramways, pour avoir des bicyclettes, puis avoir des piétons à Montréal, ils vont dire oui. Ils diront jamais oui. François Legault n'est pas intéressé dans le futur d'aucun de vos enfants. Ces enfants vont être bien corrects, ils vont avoir un bunker pour pas vivre les changements climatiques. Fait que c'est une guerre de classe, c'est une guerre sociale. Puis c'est comme ça qu'on se monte ensemble. On veut plus de police dans nos métros, on veut de l'harmonie, on veut pouvoir se déplacer, on veut pouvoir retrouver notre monde, briser notre isolation et ne pas subir une apocalypse climatique. Rien de moins.
Merci.
OK, alors j'ai deux questions ici.
Je m'appelle Ville, je suis du collectif des assoiffés de justice avec la CEF Nord qui milite pour la gratuité du transport en commun. Je veux juste apporter mon point de vue simplement. Moi, ce qui me convainc d'adopter les transports, la gratuité du transport en commun, c'est tous les avantages qu'on en retire au plan environnemental, au plan social, en redonnant de la mobilité aux citoyens dans la gratuité, puis aussi au plan économique, quand on constate que tous les avantages, ça procure, comme disait Madame, en investissant dans les transports en commun, ça génère des profits énormes aussi. Et puis, sur le plan environnemental, je suis extrêmement sensible à toute la pollution que la congestion routière crée chaque jour, du lundi au vendredi, matin et soir. C'est énorme les coûts de pollution que ça apporte. C'est énorme la pollution due à la congestion routière. Puis il faut réduire l'utilisation d'automobiles solo pour faire des promotions pour promouvoir le transport en commun gratuit, pour que la population adopte le transport en commun, pour qu'on réduise l'utilisation des automobiles qui polluent énormément. C'est un grave problème. On sait, comme vous savez, que 43% des gaz à effet de serre, on dit, sont produits par les transports et aussi par les transports routiers, le transport industriel. Et puis, il faut absolument réduire notre empreinte écologique due à l'utilisation à outrance de la voiture. Puis ça se fait aussi dans un plan économique aussi, là, de réduction, de désindustrialisation, puis de réduction de la pollution, et puis dans un contexte de décroissance, pour que l'économie décroisse. On n'a pas besoin de produire autant de biens de consommation comme on en produit actuellement pour réduire la pollution et réduire les transports collectifs. Et c'est extrêmement important. C'est en ce moment qu'il faut prendre des décisions pour que dans l'avenir, on ait un avenir plus viable. Merci.
Mais je peux dire des choses, mais ce sera pas intéressant.
Guillaume, vente pas ça.
OK, je vais juste checker le temps. So it's 8:40, il est 8h40. C'est pas forcément nécessaire qu'on termine dans 5 minutes. I would like to see if does anybody want to try and do a wrap of what we did tonight. Quelqu'un qui soit sur le panel ou soit dans la salle. Non, avec un W. Emballer un peu où on est rendu maintenant. Si maintenant on va continuer la conversation, c'est quoi notre message à notre salle prochaine? Qu'est-ce que nous allons sur quoi nous allons pencher. Ça se peut que c'est quoi le rapport de force que nous avons collectivement. C'est quoi la stratégie pour les prochaines semaines. Ça se peut que c'est ça qu'on mette sur notre ordre de jour la prochaine. Peut-être qu'on a besoin des économistes davantage pour essayer d'analyser les impacts.
Les écologistes.
We have to rid ourselves of this myth that police are going to protect us, because they're not going to protect us. All they do is harass homeless people in the metro, harass Indigenous people, harass Black people. That's all they do. Harass disabled people. That's all they fucking do, okay? And we also have to rid ourselves of this idea that we can just passively get what we want based on just thinking, oh, this is what I want, this is what I wish for the world. We have to be actively asking for what we want, not asking, taking what we want. And we have to remember also that there's this idea of magical thinking that comes around when we introduce ideas of socialism, ideas of like free public transit, all this stuff. Politicians will come back to us saying, and I've had this said to me actually by Concordia administrators too, of like, oh, that's magical thinking, we can't think like that, like blah, blah, blah. But it's not magical thinking when the colonialism was happening. It wasn't magical thinking when it was like bulldozing to everything to get the exact system that these like largely white male politicians were, you know, advocating for. So when somebody tells you, oh, that's magical thinking, oh, that's gonna take too long, whatever, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. Okay. So, anyone want to translate that?
We do need a big change, right? I think when we say systemic change, we're not talking small potatoes here.
Yeah.
It is big, but we don't exactly see where we're going. I don't think yet, but we have elements of in place. Try.
Well, I think.
Give it a go.
Oh, je sais pas là-dessus.
Come on.
Well, I also just want to say one more thing.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. We're gonna let her have a go. Go.
C'est pas le wrap-up complet, mais sur les
Partiel, c'est bon.
Sur les prochaines étapes, je pense que déjà vous allez commencer d'unir les forces. Je pense à parler du Front commun pour la transition énergétique. Moi, j'ai déjà cité une manif pour la gratuité du transport public. Je pense que c'est un groupe de cyclistes qui l'organisait dans le Vieux-Montréal. Écoutez, il y a beaucoup de monde, c'est comme sur l'avenir énergétique du Québec. Et peut-être qu'un Front commun à faire là-dessus aussi. Entre l'électrification versus transport collectif, on peut. Fait que je pense que c'est d'unir les forces et aussi d'informer la population de tous les arguments, de dire que l'investissement, c'est bon pour la santé, c'est bon pour l'économie. Parce que l'ensemble d'informer aussi tout le monde pour. C'est ça.
Okay, I'm going to use my terrible power and I'm going to give it to you to give us one last wrap.
Ça ne sera pas un rap, mais ça bondit sur.
Bondi.
Ok, je vais bondir. Je m'appelle Virginie Chagnon. Je suis ici de l'organisation qui s'appelle Travailleurs sur la justice climatique. Globalement, l'objectif est de faire en sorte qu'à l'intérieur des milieux syndiqués, qu'on amène dans les conventions collectives des objectifs j'aime pas le mot, mais les autres, il y avait ça, développement durable. Mettons qu'on accepte l'expression. En ce sens-là, aujourd'hui, j'entends des arguments à l'effet économiquement, c'est rentable le transport collectif. Étant donné qu'on a des personnes en position de pouvoir qui ne connaissent que ça, le mot rentabilité, ainsi que, ADN, c'est bottom line, combien ça nous rapporte. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres personnes, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres acteurs ou d'autres organisations qui auraient ce genre d'intérêt-là? Si on agit du côté du milieu syndical pour influencer les employeurs, oui, c'est une chose, mais est-ce qu'on peut agir en mobilisant nos employeurs pour qu'eux fassent pression pour l'investissement en transport en commun? Il existe dans des grosses organisations, généralement privées, des incitations à la mobilité active, nommément payer une partie de la passe de transport en commun chaque mois. C'est quelque chose qui va dans la bonne direction, puis ça amène toute notre
notre discours, nos avantages, de faire en sorte que les gens embarquent plus en mouvement, et ainsi de suite. Fait qu'il y a cet aspect-là, mobiliser des employeurs, particulièrement si on a des gros employeurs. Ensuite, ça peut être aussi des employeurs quand on emploie, c'est le gouvernement, parce que c'est très inégal. Je sais qu'il y a des gens qui travaillent dans des organismes parapublics comme la CNSST. Ben, en tant qu'employeur parapublic, la CNSST paye une partie de ta passe d'autobus, si tu veux. De la même façon que si tu travailles, on va dire, dans le ministère de la Santé et des Services sociaux, ton employeur, c'est le gouvernement. Cependant, si tu travailles au centre-sud de Montréal, oui, tu peux avoir une partie de ta passe qui est payée d'autobus. Okay. Mais c'est pas le cas si tu travailles dans un autre sud de Ville, je pense, ou ailleurs. Je vais parler de Ville. Et puis la dernière chose, acteurs à mobiliser, ben, c'est les gens qui sont en santé publique, je pense, étant donné que le corollaire d'avoir moins de voitures sur la route, c'est d'avoir un environnement plus sain. On réduit énormément nos troubles cardiovasculaires et cardio-respiratoires quand on diminue la pollution causée par les voitures, les camions de transport en général. Je travaille en santé publique.
Regarde, I think that we're going to let. I think we're going to end with that question. You had a chance earlier.
Non,
but
on peut l'entendre.
on va l'entendre. Ok. So, dernier mot à toi.
Oui. Ben, dans le fond, moi j'aime ça, voir la résistance comme quelque chose de décentralisé, qu'il y a plein de gens qui font plein de belles choses, puis c'est merveilleux comme ça. On n'a pas besoin d'avoir une grande stratégie centrale, un parti, une grosse organisation qui nous structure. Je pense que ce qu'on a entendu dans les différentes présentations, une manière de rapper, c'est qu'il y a différentes stratégies à adopter. Je veux dire, si on est dans un syndicat, vraiment, essayer d'imposer ça dans les conventions collectives, parce que vous créez un rapport de force avec les employeurs, qui eux autres veulent pouvoir vous détruire la nature, et puis parce que eux autres, ça les impacte pas économiquement, mais si jamais vous créez un rapport de force pour avoir un impact économique dessus. Moi, je fais partie de l'âge climatique, on a produit un petit journal qui explique pourquoi il faut bloquer l'usine de Northvolt. On pense que c'est vraiment pertinent, je veux dire, de bloquer les infrastructures de transport. Je ne sais pas si vous avez vu en Allemagne, mais il y a une usine de Tesla qui a eu une manifestation qui a fait exploser des transformateurs à côté de l'usine de Tesla. Fait que la production a été arrêtée pendant 2 mois. Fait que, tu sais, je veux dire, si concrètement on se met tous à essayer de détruire, c'est ça, tu sais, je veux dire, un petit exemple, genre, qui est intéressant sur l'usine de Northvolt, c'est que le gouvernement provincial essaie de donner le feu vert à toutes. Mais c'est vraiment sur la législation fédérale que Northvolt a été bloqué. C'est à cause que, je veux dire, le retour des oiseaux, le 15 avril, ils ne pouvaient pas couper les arbres. Fait que, concrètement, genre en 2035, ce sera plus possible, je veux dire, d'acheter des autos à gaz. Fait que, tu sais, c'est comme, on peut se servir de ça, se servir de l'opportunité pour bloquer la construction, essayer d'augmenter les coûts, s'attaquer aux concessionnaires automobiles. Et puis, ben, c'est ça, avec une diversité de stratégies, je veux dire, dans les transports en commun, une stratégie de blocage économique. De l'autre côté, des gens qui essaient de produire des automobiles, puis de transporter l'automobile au-delà du peak oil, tu sais. Je pense qu'on est capable de les stopper avec différentes stratégies. Puis c'est important quand même de garder en tête les différentes limites, tu sais, je veux dire, c'est comme le transport en commun, pas n'importe comment, pas avec un millier de flics, pas avec, je veux dire, la discrimination envers les personnes autochtones, pas, tu sais, fait que faut juste garder en tête les perspectives des autres camarades qui ont présenté ce soir pour éviter que ça nous nuise, et puis que, essentiellement, on a besoin d'en faire 3 des révolutions, on va en faire une, ça va être drôle en crise, ça va être le fun.
That was a wrap. That was a wrap. So thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you for organizers, for organizing. I know it wasn't just, it was a group work. Thank you for assisting from Toronto.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, number one.
We'll see you at the next one.
Also from Toronto.
All right.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci tellement.